Rachel, put your hands where I can see them.
Okay, what is
The
going
credit
on
card
right now?
skimmer in your pants pocket. You've been swiping every customer card into it all night.
I was just doing my job. I was running cards. I was
We
doing
have
my
you on
job.
camera swiping every card into your pocket before you ran it.
Listen to me.
The manager's voice came through the earpiece at 9:47 p.m., and the two words he said stopped everything. Found something. Rachel Tyler was midway through a four-table section on a busy Thursday night at Twin Peaks on Southwest 3rd Street in Oklahoma City. She had a tray of drinks in her left hand and a black check folder tucked under her right arm, and she had been moving through that dining room with the practiced efficiency of someone who had worked restaurant floors for the better part of 15 years. She knew this building. She knew these cameras. She had spent months preparing for exactly this night. What she did not know was that 8 months before she walked back through that employee entrance, a renovation crew had moved the camera above the service while 6 feet to the left. The dead zone she had memorized no longer existed. Every move she had made since 5 o'clock was on tape. Drop your location in the comments right now. City, state, wherever you are watching from. And if you have ever handed your credit card to a server and watched it disappear around a corner, this story is going to change how you do that. Subscribe now, because we are just getting started. Rachel Elizabeth Tyler was born in Oklahoma City in the spring of 1984. She grew up on the east side of May Avenue in a small ranch house with a chain-link fence out front and a concrete patio in the back, where her father grilled on weekends when he was not driving his beverage distribution route between Edmond and Norman. Her mother worked the early nursing home shift off North Lincoln Boulevard, up before sunrise, home by 7 in the evening. Exhausted in the particular way that people who care for other people get exhausted when the pay does not match the weight of the work. Rachel was the middle child. Older brother, younger sister. The neighbors who would later talk to local reporters remembered her as the one who tried hardest. She made breakfast for her sister on school mornings when their mother had already left. She mowed the lawn in July without being asked. Her fourth-grade teacher wrote on a progress report that Rachel was an attentive student who watched everything and missed nothing. That line would read differently years later, with the benefit of everything that came after it. The first incident on record happened in 8th grade. Lunch money taken from another girl's locker. A principal's conference, a week of in-school suspension, a mother who cried in the office, and a daughter who sat in the chair with her hands folded and answered every question in one word. The school counselor noted that she did not appear remorseful so much as inconvenienced. It was the first time anyone put that specific observation in writing about Rachel Tyler. It would not be the last. She graduated from a public high school in southwest Oklahoma City in 2002 with a B- average and no clear plan. Community college was mentioned. A medical billing certificate brochure sat on the kitchen counter for a while. Neither happened. By that summer, she was car hopping at a Sonic on Southwestern Avenue in red roller skates for $7.10 an hour, learning the first lesson that restaurant and service work teaches everyone who enters it. The customer is always watching you, but nobody is watching the customer watch you. The next decade was a series of jobs that all looked similar from the outside. Waffle House, Denny's, a Mexican restaurant on Northwest 23rd, a short Hooters stint that ended after a dispute over a missing bank deposit that was never formally pursued but never quite explained either. She was genuinely good at the work when she applied herself. Customers remembered her. Regulars asked for her section. She had what the industry calls tables, the loyal ones who come back and sit in your section on purpose. Managers wrote evaluations that said things like personable with guests and moves well under pressure. 3 of those evaluations, across 3 separate restaurants between 2006 and 2012, also included a phrase that appeared each time without anyone connecting it to the previous times. Needs improvement on cash handling procedures. A short drawer at end of shift. A credit card slip that did not match the printed receipt. A comped meal nobody remembered authorizing. $40 here, $60 there. Small enough that each restaurant wrote it off as the cost of doing business. Small enough that no manager ever thought to call the manager at the last place and ask whether they had seen the same thing. Nobody ever connected the dots across employers. That gap in how the restaurant industry shares information, or more accurately how it does not, was something Rachel Tyler understood better than the people running the places that kept hiring her. In 2014, she got married. She and her husband met at a bar near Bricktown, where she was waitressing on weekends. He worked construction. The wedding was small. Folding chairs. Sheet cake from Walmart. Her sister in a teal dress that did not quite fit serving as maid of honor. The marriage lasted 19 months. By spring of 2016, the divorce was final. No property to divide. That's on both sides. She kept her maiden name on most paperwork and her married name on an apartment lease she could no longer afford alone. That was when the planning started. Not the impulsive kind of planning that comes from desperation. The other kind. The kind that takes months and involves research and a mail drop and a cryptocurrency transaction and a device ordered from a vendor operating out of a server in Eastern Europe. To understand what Rachel Tyler built over the next 2 years, you need to understand the mechanics of how a restaurant credit card transaction actually works, because the scheme she constructed was not built around breaking the system. It was built around understanding it better than anyone responsible for securing it. When a customer at Twin Peaks finishes their meal, they hand a black check folder containing their credit card to their server. The server walks that folder to one of 3 point-of-sale terminals in the building and swipes the card through a hardwired terminal connected to the restaurant's processing system. The transaction posts. A receipt prints. The server returns the folder to the table. The customer signs and adds a tip. The card is in the server's physical possession for somewhere between 30 and 90 seconds. That window exists at every restaurant in America. It is the necessary vulnerability built into the entire architecture of table service hospitality. The system functions because it is built on trust, and because no one ever designed it with the assumption that a server would carry a secondary reading device in their uniform pocket. Rachel Tyler worked at the Twin Peaks on Southwest 3rd Street from August of 2016 through April of 2017. 8 months. During that tenure, she did something that none of her managers knew she was doing. She studied the camera system. Not obviously. Not by looking up at the lenses or asking questions. By standing in the same spots hundreds of times across hundreds of shifts and watching the sweep patterns, the angles, the fixed intervals, the places where 2 camera ranges met and left a small dead corridor between them. By the time she quit in April of 2017, she had identified one location in the building that worked. A spot near the service well at the bar where a camera mounted near the back hallway swept past at a fixed interval, leaving approximately 4 seconds during which a server standing in a particular position could perform a secondary card swipe without appearing on any active recording angle. She quit. She filed away what she knew. And she waited. In February of 2018, she made a purchase through a cryptocurrency exchange. The item was a credit card skimming device, black plastic, roughly the size of a thick stick of gum, with a magnetic stripe reader on one edge and a USB connector on the other. She had it shipped to a mail drop, not to her apartment. The device could capture the card number, cardholder name, expiration date, and service code from any card run through its reader. It stored the data internally. Later, connected to a laptop via USB, it would dump everything into a plain text file. On a busy Friday night in a full-service restaurant, a motivated server with clean POS handling technique could capture between 20 and 50 cards in a single shift. She had the device in February. She did not have a job at Twin Peaks yet, which raises the question that investigators would later spend considerable time on. What was she doing with it for the 4 months before she walked back through that employee entrance in June? The answer emerged from subpoenaed records and a cross-reference of fraud complaints that nobody had connected before the investigation began. Between February and May of 2018, Rachel worked brief stints at 3 separate Oklahoma City area restaurants: a steakhouse in Moore, a sports bar in Norman, a hotel restaurant near Will Rogers Airport. None of the tenures lasted more than 3 weeks. Each ended for reasons that seemed unrelated at the time: a scheduling dispute, a walkout mid-shift, a no-call no-show on a Sunday brunch. When investigators cross-referenced her work dates at those 3 restaurants against customer fraud complaints filed in the same window, the pattern was immediate and unambiguous. 11 fraud complaints at the steakhouse in Moore, 9 at the sports bar in Norman, 6 at the airport hotel restaurant. All of them on shifts Rachel had worked. All of them involving cards used at those restaurants. Total estimated loss across the 3 short tenures before she ever set foot back in Twin Peaks: $19,400. Those were not the real target. Those were the warm-up. What she wanted was the building she already knew. The camera angles she had already mapped. The dead zone she had already confirmed. She applied to Twin Peaks in early June of 2018. The general manager who processed her paperwork was new to the location. He had not been there during her previous tenure. He saw an experienced returning employee and counted himself fortunate to fill a spot before the 4th of July weekend rush. He did not run a fresh background check. Corporate policy did not require one for returning employees with an active file. He pulled up her old W-4, updated her direct deposit, and put her on the Thursday night shift. What neither of them knew, the general manager because he had only transferred to this location 6 months earlier, and Rachel because she had been gone for over a year, was that the bar area cameras had been replaced and repositioned during a renovation in early 2018. The new camera was mounted 6 feet to the left of the old one. The dead zone Rachel had spent 8 months identifying and confirming no longer existed. What had been a blind spot was now covered. She walked into a building she thought she knew completely. She was wrong about the one thing that mattered most. Here is what makes this story different from a simple caught-on-camera moment. What the manager saw that night was not obvious. If it had been obvious, the system would have caught it during her first tenure. What he saw required him to already be watching closely, to happen to be reviewing footage from the right window, and to notice a gesture so small and practiced that on fast forward, it looked like nothing more than a server adjusting her uniform. The general manager on duty that night had been with the Twin Peaks chain for 9 years. He had transferred to the Southwest 3rd Street location from a Dallas location 6 months earlier. He was the kind of manager who walked the floor during service and reviewed footage during the lull. Around 9:30, after the dinner rush settled, he went into the back office and pulled up the previous 2 hours of bar area footage on fast forward. He was looking for something specific. A regular customer had complained about a slow check at table 14. At 9:52, he scrolled back to the 7:30 mark. He watched Rachel Tyler move through her section at 4 times speed, picking up folders, walking to the service well, running cards at the POS terminal. It was routine. Then he saw a small motion near her right hip. The gesture was quick. On fast forward, it could have been anything. He let the footage continue. A minute later, he saw it again. Same spot, same gesture, same pocket. He stopped the playback. He rewound. He played it at normal speed. A server pulling a credit card from a black folder, swiping it through the POS terminal. Then, instead of returning the card directly to the folder, bringing it down to her right hip in a motion that was deliberate and practiced, and that any person alive in 2018 would recognize as a card swipe. The card returning to the folder returning to the table. The transaction appearing from every angle the cameras had been designed to cover, completely standard. He switched to the camera that had been moved 6 feet to the left during the renovation, the one Rachel did not know about. In that angle, what had been a question became a certainty. A black object in her right hand, a magnetic stripe reader, a credit card moving through it with practiced efficiency. He called Oklahoma City Police Department at 9:58. Do you think a scheme this carefully planned could be running right now at a restaurant near you? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Because the answer is more complicated than most people want to admit. 2 officers arrived at the Twin Peaks on Southwest 3rd Street at 10:06. They came through the kitchen entrance, so the dining room would not know anything was happening. The manager walked them into the back office and played the footage. Both officers watched it twice. Before they approached Rachel, one of them ran her name through the department's record system. The results came back in 90 seconds. Outstanding warrants in Tulsa County. 2 felony counts of obtaining money by false pretenses. 1 felony count of second-degree burglary. 1 misdemeanor count of possession of a controlled substance. The Tulsa warrants had been active since April of 2018. She had been at work for less than 4 hours. She was already wanted in 2 counties. The manager went out onto the floor and told Rachel there was a question about a customer complaint. She came to the back office carrying a half-empty tray of empty glasses. She set the tray on the table inside the office. She turned around. She saw the 2 officers standing in the corner. The officer who wrote the incident report described what happened next in 3 sentences. Her shoulders dropped. Her eyes went to the door. She took 1 step backward and stopped. When asked to empty her pockets, she told the officers she had nothing in them. When they told her they had footage, she asked footage of what? She had been there 4 hours and had not done anything. When they told her again to empty her pockets, she stood still for 6 seconds. Her right hand moved to her hip and stopped there. She looked at the manager against the wall. She looked at the officer covering the door. Then she reached into her right front pocket and placed a black plastic device on the table next to her tray of empty glasses. "That is a phone charger," she said. "Ma'am, that is not a phone charger." The handcuffs went on. As the officers walked her out the back door past the dumpsters and the line cooks on their smoke break, who watched in silence, she said one thing to no one in particular. "I should have stayed in Tulsa." It was the only completely honest thing she said that night. Rachel Elizabeth Tyler was booked into Oklahoma County Jail at 12:18 in the morning on June 29, 2018. The skimming device recovered from her pocket contained 23 complete card records from customers who had eaten at Twin Peaks that evening between 5 and 9:50 p.m. A laptop recovered from her vehicle in the employee parking lot contained 4 text files with card data for an additional 147 accounts captured across her 3 short tenures at the Moore Steakhouse, the Norman Sports Bar, and the Airport Hotel Restaurant. Total confirmed compromised cards before the investigation was complete, 245. Total estimated fraudulent charges across 2 years for restaurants, and 1 returning employee who had spent her first tenure mapping the cameras she would exploit on her second, $51,000. The investigation expanded over 4 months. Oklahoma City detectives worked with the United States Secret Service Field Office, which handles federal financial crimes, and with the Tulsa County District Attorney's Office. The card data from her laptop was cross-referenced against fraud complaint databases maintained by Visa, MasterCard, and American Express. 31 additional fraud complaints previously unlinked to any specific restaurant employee were identified, all originating from accounts used at one of the 4 restaurants on shifts Rachel had worked. Twin Peaks Corporate conducted its own audit of her previous tenure at the Southwest 3rd Street location. That tenure had run from August 2016 through April 2017. Loss prevention identified 74 customer-initiated chargebacks tied to transactions on her shifts. All had been processed at the time as ordinary fraud claims. None had been linked to a specific employee. With the benefit of the investigation and hindsight, the pattern was unmistakable. Her first tenure at Twin Peaks had almost certainly involved the same activity, possibly the same device. Definitely the same method and the same dead zone. The dead zone she had spent 8 months identifying. The dead zone the renovation had eliminated before she came back to use it. In November of 2018, Rachel entered a negotiated plea before a district judge in Oklahoma County. She pleaded guilty to 1 felony count of unlawful use of a computer in Oklahoma County and to 2 of the 4 felony counts pending in Tulsa County. The remaining charges were dismissed as part of the agreement. She received 7 years in the custody of the Oklahoma Department of Corrections, with the first 3 years to be served and the remaining 4 suspended pending probation compliance. She was ordered to pay restitution of $41,200 to the 4 affected restaurants and their card processors. The judge addressed her from the bench before sentencing. He said the dollar amount was modest compared to many financial crimes his court handled. What distinguished her case was not the scale. It was the preparation. The 4 months between ordering the device and her first shift back. The mail drop. The 3 restaurants used to refine the technique before returning to the building she already knew. The deliberate exploitation of trust extended by an employer who had hired her once before and did not know to be more careful the second time. "You did not stumble into this," he said. "You walked into this with a plan you spent half a year building. You returned to the very people who had given you a job once before and used the trust they extended to you a second time as cover for what you already intended to do. That is not a crime of opportunity. That is a crime of preparation." Rachel was transferred to Mabel Bassett Correctional Center in McLeod, Oklahoma, in late November of 2018. She served 2 years and 7 months of her 3-year custody term and was released on parole in the summer of 2021. As a condition of parole, she is permanently barred from any employment involving customer payment information. She returned to Oklahoma City after her release and works, according to her last reported parole filing, in an administrative role at a warehouse handling industrial cleaning supplies. She does not interact with customers. She does not touch cards. Her parole terms run through 2025. The Twin Peaks on Southwest 3rd Street replaced the bar area cameras in early 2019 and formalized a new corporate policy requiring servers to swipe cards in full view of a fixed overhead camera and to display empty hands before and after each transaction. The policy is named internally after the city where the incident occurred. The servers at the Southwest 3rd Street location call it the OKC protocol. Most of them have never been told why it exists. The dead zone Rachel Tyler spent 8 months identifying and confirming has not existed in that building since early 2018, when a renovation crew moved a camera 6 feet to the left and eliminated it without knowing they were doing anything more significant than updating equipment. She had mapped a vulnerability that had already been fixed before she came back to use it. She just did not know. And that one piece of information she did not have, that single gap in her otherwise meticulous preparation, was the thing that unraveled everything. The next time you hand your card to a server at a restaurant and watch it disappear toward the back of the room, you will probably think about this story. That is not a bad thing to think about. Most servers are exactly what they appear to be, but the ones who are not are counting on you to stop thinking about it by the time they get to the service well. Subscribe if this story stayed with you. Share it with someone who eats out regularly and has never thought about where their card goes. And drop a comment. Do you think 7 years was the right sentence for what Rachel Tyler planned and executed? Or should the consequences have been different? I want to know where you stand.